All right, a quick review of direct objects before we move on to indirect. So direct objects, remember these are the things taking the direct action of the verb or the thing being verbed. Okay, so we have two steps. You're going to find the action verb. If it's a linking verb, if you can replace it with an equal sign, then it does not have a direct object. Only action verbs can take direct objects. Once you find that action verb, you're going to ask who or what. So I kicked the soccer ball. I kicked, that's an action. Kicked what? Kicked the soccer ball. A direct object can be either a noun or a pronoun. If we are using a pronoun, okay, then in English, okay, we have a certain chart: me, you, him, her, it, us, them. In French, there are 7 direct object pronouns: me, te, le, la, nous, vous, and les. The major difference between these, besides, of course, the te and vous issue, which you're used to by now, we've seen that 7 billion times. The main issue is that direct object pronouns in French go before the verb. So if I say, I gave the gift to Bob, I gave what? I gave the gift. Je donne le cadeau à Bob. Je donne what? Donne le cadeau. Same concept. When we want to say I gave it to Bob, le cadeau is going to be replaced with le, it, for a masculine object. However, I cannot say je donne le. I'm going to move that le to go in front of my verb. Je le donne à Bob. This means that anything in that singular column, the me, te, le, or la, might contract if the verb begins with a vowel. So for example, if I say, I have a pencil, j'ai un crayon, but I want to say, I have it, je l'ai, L apostrophe A. Because my crayon, replaced by le, has to go in front of my AI for I have, and then contracts to an L apostrophe. Je l'ai, I have it. Indirect objects, or things taking the indirect object action of the verb, or the thing that is happening to, follow almost the exact same rules. So we're going to find the action verb. Again, linking verbs cannot have direct or indirect objects. We find the action verb and then we ask to whom or to what. You can either do this directly, so I gave the present to Bob, I gave to whom? To Bob. Or, since 99.9% of the time that you have indirect objects, you'll also have a direct object. Sometimes it can be a little bit easier to find the direct object first, and then ask your to who or to what question. So I gave the present to Bob, I gave what? I gave the present. I gave the present to whom? I gave the present to Bob. Either way, you're going to end up with the same answer, but on occasion, including the direct object can make it a little bit clearer. Again, indirect objects can be either nouns or pronouns, as long as it has that to a vast majority of the time. That keyword a, or one of its contractions, such as o or o, is a lot more common in French than it is in English. You might have it in English, I gave the present to Bob, okay? Or you don't have to. Bob gave me a thank you card. Bob gave what? The thank you card. To whom? To me. Me is still the indirect object without the word to there. French uses that a or o a lot more often than English uses to. So it's a pretty easy way to find the indirect object I'm going to say probably about 90% of the time. However, a or o plus a place will not be an indirect object. See how many exclamation points I put behind that? I really, 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 really want you to know this. And if you think about it in English, it makes sense. If you say, I'm going to school, je vais à l'école, you couldn't say, I'm going to it. That isn't right. You would say, I'm going there. The there is not an indirect object. It's a completely different kind of pronoun. We're going to learn how to do the theirs in chapter 3, but for right now, all you need to know is that an a or an o plus a place is not an indirect object. Ever. Never, ever, 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 ever. Never. Got that? Never. You'll typically find indirect objects in one of two kinds of sentences. Things that have to do with directional action verbs. So the action ends up with something happening in a certain direction. So for example, if I kick a soccer ball, it has to go in a certain direction. If I throw a baseball, it goes in a certain direction. Or it has to do with giving things. So you're giving that present to Bob, or you're donating, money to an organization. There are plenty of other possibilities, of course, but these are probably the most common. When we use indirect object pronouns, French takes a tiny bit of mercy on us and only gives us 6. And 4 of them are the exact same. Me, te, nous, and vous are both direct and indirect object pronouns. The only ones that change are third person. Le, la, les becomes lui and leur. A lot of times students will come up to me and they'll be like, oh my goodness, then how in the world am I supposed to tell the difference? Well, but you tell the difference in English all the time. English has no change in between direct and indirect object pronouns. You have me, you, him, her, it, us, them. Those are your direct object pronouns in English. Those are your indirect object pronouns in English. They don't change. French at least gives you 2/3 that do change. The other 4, you can figure it out by context. It's always pretty obvious. Just like direct objects, indirect objects will also go in front of your verb, and the me and the te will still contract. So let's look at an example. If I say, I sent a letter to Benoit, or in French, j'envoie une lettre à Benoit. Benoit is my indirect object because I sent what? I sent a letter. I sent a letter to whom? To Benoit. When we replace it, I sent a letter to him. In French, we go back to that chart. Oh, him and her and it are all 3 going to translate as lui. There's no gender difference in indirect object pronouns anymore. So, flip out him for lui and throw it in front of my verb. Je lui envoie une lettre.